Today is Monday, September 30th, and this is Spring Office Hours Season 3, Episode 32, Streaming Data with Chris Bono. My name is Dan Vega, Spring Developer Advocate at Broadcom, joined by my good friend and colleague, DaShaun Carter. DaShaun, how you doing?
It is a wonderful time, a fabulous time to be a Spring developer, and life is good. Life is good. I've got a lot of things on my plate. I've got a lot of things that I'm working on, all over from... I won't even get into it. I got a lot of stuff going on, but I'm happy. I'm having fun with it. How about you?
Yeah, it's better than having no things to work on because that would not be fun.
I love,
especially in our position.
Yes.
So I was out of town last week. So were you? But I was in Dallas for JConf. That was an awesome time. It was great. It was too short for me. I didn't get to stay both days. I got in on a Tuesday, left on a Wednesday night. Then had a few delays, so I got home at like 2:30 in the morning, which is never fun. Kids get me up at 6:30 a.m. and so it was a short night there, but it was a lot of fun. We had a speaker dinner where I hung out with some people, one who we are going to talk to in a second. But a lot of the regulars were there. It's great, catching up with speakers that we get to see on the speaker circuit all the time. I got to see a few presentations. It was awesome. Really great location in Dallas and now in Texas, probably like 40 minutes outside the airport there. It was a lot of fun. Just doing that, working on some things, presentations. AI is always top of mind. Some new things. One thing, Thomas is here. I was just going to mention it. Thomas got me hip to it. I didn't realize it was coming today, but if you go to the Spring Initializer, start.spring.io, there is a new template engine available, J2E. Thomas has been a big fan of this or JTE, sorry. Thomas has been a huge proponent of this for a long time, and I just haven't given it a chance yet. I haven't checked it out. Now that it's on the Spring Initializer, I got to. So I'm going to give it a spin this week, and I'll report back. So
I don't know if Thomas is the one that opened up the issue or opened up the GitHub issue.
I'm
but
sure
this
he
is just a good time to say Spring is open source. And a lot of the stuff that we do comes from the community. Sometimes it's from the open source community. Sometimes it's from our customers. My trip last week was with a customer where we go and we have these events and we help them figure out things and we learn from them and they learn from us. But that's one of the nice things. I was always jealous of the teams, of the orgs that had relationships with the Spring team, that had the events and the training and all that stuff. I was always jealous. And now I get to be a part of that. I get to see it. I get to see And I had reason to be jealous, right? That's amazing things that we do when we get to go and spend time with our customers.
I know.
Here we are. The other thing that I want to say is, like, my daughter had her 13th birthday on Friday.
Ooh,
and
happy
they went
birthday.
on a trip to New York. Have you ever heard of Jelly Roll?
Jelly Roll, the singer? Yeah.
The singer, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jelly Roll happened to be staying at the same hotel as my family.
Wow.
And he sang happy birthday to my daughter on her birthday. So
Wow.
that was kind of like, that's a
Is there a video
thing.
of this?
There is a video. That's on my Instagram. You can see
All
a little
right.
clip of it. And yeah, that was really special. So I'm still kind of giddy about that.
That's so cool. Yeah. That's a pretty good way to spend a 13th birthday.
I think that's going to be one that she remembers.
Yep.
For sure.
All right, we're going to get into it. But first, real quick, again, this is a live stream. We do it every Monday from 1 to 2 Eastern. So if you're able to join us live, that's great. If you're here now, please do us a favor and get your questions in. If they're related to what we're going to talk about today, great. If they're not, we'll try and answer those as well. But if you are unable to join us live, you can go ahead and catch the replay on the Spring Developer YouTube channel. We also go ahead and take this and turn it into a podcast, so you can get it wherever you get your podcasts the very next day. So Tuesday morning, this is usually live. With that, DaShaun, I'm going to bring on our special guest, and he is the one, the only Chris Bono.
Yeah! We've been working on this one for a long time. This is long overdue. I'm not going to lie. I'm going to remind everybody that's here live, tell us where you're from. My mom and dad always watch the show. Love you, Mom and Dad. But they like to see where everybody's joining from. So yeah, if you're here, say hi. Let us know where you're joining from. Chris!
Awesome.
It's about time.
Yeah, it's been a while.
It's about time. It's all my fault. I take all the blame. It's all my fault. I think we've had you scheduled a couple of times and then had to make changes. But
I'm joining from Austin, Texas, by the way. So yeah.
Oh, you're still in Texas. All right. So you were the one I was talking about. We were both at JConf last week.
Yeah.
That was in Allen, Texas. So what made you go down to Austin, Texas?
I live in Austin. Yeah. I jumped up to JConf because my coworker, one of our coworkers, Glenn Renfro, was speaking. I had the lovely ability to not speak this time, so it was great just to come view. And so I figured to jump in my car for 3.5 hours to go hang with some coworkers. So
nice. Did you enjoy the conference? Any highlights for you?
It was good, and for me, unlike well, you said yours was short, mostly probably because of the travel back and forth and the conference was smaller, but the saturation level was really nice. So there was like four sessions per hour. Yeah. And it was smaller turnout, but each room, it was saturated well enough that it felt well attended. Yep. Content was good. I had a great time.
I like that word, saturated. I like how you use that. It made a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, whenever you look at the people to seat ratio, and it was nice. Yeah.
There are pros and cons to both, right? Smaller conferences and big, huge conferences. I think somewhere in the middle is probably good, but I love the smaller conferences because, as you said, you get to sit there and talk to people. There isn't 8 tracks going on. There isn't 300 sessions that you got to choose from. There's a very small amount of sessions. You go choose from them. You get to talk to people. I thoroughly enjoyed it. So, and Glenn's here. It was great to see Glenn.
It's always nice that we get members of the Spring Engineering community to come in and join. And sometimes they ask questions. Again, I'll remind everybody, when you come to my house for dinner, if you leave hungry, that's your fault. Here, this is office hours. You are meant to bring your questions. If you don't ask your questions, that's your fault. And we might not answer on air, but we have people like Glenn. Jonathan likes to join us a lot. We have people we have a great community.
Glenn just came to heckle me.
Maybe. I watched Glenn and Oleg's session from the Road to Spring One event that we did last year. I watched that as kind of like a prep for today. So yeah.
Well, Chris, before we kind of jump into things, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do on the Spring team, some of the projects you're involved in?
Yep. So I'm Chris Bono. I'm co-lead a couple projects here at Spring. The main one is Spring Cloud Data Flow, and Spring Cloud Data Flow is a microservice-based eventing and batch use case. Basically, you can string together your Spring Cloud Stream applications with your Spring Batch or Spring Cloud Task applications, put them in a nice little graphical editor, have sources, sinks, processors, and put something in the left side of the pipe, watch something come out of the right side of the pipe, if you will. Nice. When I'm not doing that, me and Sobi we're co-creators of Spring Pulsar, and so mostly I've been leading that now. Spring Pulsar, if you're familiar with Kafka or Spring, if you're familiar with Spring for Apache Kafka, then your Spring for Apache Pulsar is very similar. Another tangential project to Dataflow is Spring Cloud Stream applications, and that's a set of pre-built out-of-the-box applications. Those pieces that you can string together in the pipeline and build something interesting with. There's a handful of sources where you can pull the data in from, a handful of processors, and then a handful of consumers.
I think that this is the first time that we've actually had somebody join us from Antarctica, and I think that's like, thank you for joining.
That's pretty cool.
We have somebody saying Spring Cloud Dataflow also great for log parsing, splitting. Yes, that's one of my favorite use cases there.
And so the way I got here, so I've been on the Spring team now for about probably coming up on 3 years. And so before that, I worked at a company, and what we did was replace an in-house JVM application framework, something that you would have written 15 years ago before there was Spring Boot. And so when I came there, I said, I'm a Spring Boot user. Why can I not use Spring Boot? What are we doing here? It's Spring. It's a very old version of it. So what we did was get rid of that thing and replace it with Boot. And in doing so, there was 1,000 applications running, quite interesting deployment infrastructure, proprietary. And so each one of those things you can envision as some type of company XYZ starter. And in doing that, I started making a lot of contributions to Boot and to other Spring projects. Kind of I caught the buzz, caught the open source buzz, and I've been here ever since. So,
wow, that is a similar story that we've been hearing as we have guests on that are from the Spring team.
What do you mean?
I know Spencer talks about that a lot, how he got involved with Spring and started making some pull requests and started having some conversations with the Spring team. And I know this is a similar story from a lot of folks that we've talked to. So really cool to hear. And just a reminder that, like, hey, maybe this isn't a goal, but maybe you do want to be on the Spring team at one point. This is a great way to start. Get involved in a project. Make suggestions. It doesn't even have to be in the form of a PR. It could be just like, hey, I noticed, or maybe not a big PR. It could just be, hey, I noticed this thing in the documentation that I didn't really understand as a new person to the project, right? And so having those conversations kind of kickstarts those things. And then, as you said, the more that you do, the more you might be able to contribute, and who knows where that leads. And it doesn't have to lead to a position on the Spring team, but it can lead to like some really great relationships with some of the engineers there. So pretty cool to hear, and just a reminder for folks out there.
Cool.
I know that when we scheduled this, I did not want to talk about Spring Cloud Dataflow. Spring Cloud Dataflow is amazing. I really wanted to talk about streaming in general, but because of some events that happened last year or last week, I got in my head, I was working with somebody using MuleSoft. Are you familiar with that enterprise service bus type architecture? And the more I looked at it, as I looked at the enterprise version, the more I looked at it and I saw these little pieces, the more I thought, like, couldn't I do this with Spring Cloud Dataflow?
Yeah, and you could definitely, you string together workflows that look like data pipelines, and you have these intricate little graphs that do all this business processing. You could totally do that. I would say, MuleSoft, that is a company that's done just that.
Yes.
And a team of, it's a complete enterprise product, and there's hundreds, or I don't even know the size of the company, but that's all they do on that project. So Dataflow will have, it would be a subset of that. And really it's more of the cases. Dataflow is whenever you're already a Spring shop and you have Spring Cloud Stream applications, you have Spring Batch applications, and you're starting to have too many of them to reason with and figure out how to orchestrate this feed into this. Dataflow comes in there, and it's really helpful there.
Yeah, that's all. I just want to make sure I wasn't like, crazy.
Mentally,
thank you for confirming. That there's overlap.
Yeah, there is overlap for sure.
So I want to get right in. How does that sound?
Let's do it.
So because I just watched Glenn and Oleg, this kind of streaming data versus batch or RESTful data. A lot of our audience is familiar with RESTful stuff. A lot of our guides are about, go in and do the CRUD listing of stuff and filter and all that. But at some point, there was a shift where we saw that even the time, the latency between having something written to a database and then consuming it on a pull later, that wasn't good enough. At some point, I guess from my perspective and some of the workflows I'm used to, there was a shift where I needed that new value now. I needed instant and I needed low latency. And this is where streaming really came into light, is that I wasn't having to pull and figure out how much time. It completely changes the caching conversation when you're always getting updated data. Am I running out of the guardrails here? Like, does this make sense? Real time. Is that something that I can think about with streaming? I want all the updates. I don't want to have to pull.
Real time, yeah. But real time is always one of these tricky words that I'll try to stay away from. It's like saying big data in real time. Not to, if you'll get it. Somebody who's the same with streaming. Somebody says, well, that's not streaming. You're just sending events. And so, there's formal definitions for streaming involving wall clocks and continuous set of data coming in. And if you got a Kafka client, you're reading from Kafka, you could, in the lowest sense of it, you could consider it streaming. Some people might say that it's not streaming, to a textbooks thing. But if we think of streaming as a continuous set of data coming in, and that's where I'll typically keep it.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And we have a first question here is, hey, like I've been using Kafka streams for some time. Can you talk about, you're going to talk about Pulsar. Like, let's do a compare and contrast because these are our conversation last year is really where I got really excited about Pulsar because of the way that you described it. So how about, let's assume our audience knows about Kafka. Let's do a quick intro. What's Kafka? And then let's compare it with Pulsar.
Got it. Sounds good. So if Kafka is a distributed messaging system, and it's not a queue. And so anybody that uses Kafka, if you say it's a queue, they'll hit you over the head with something. Distributed log, right? And so Pulsar, and I won't go too far into other than that. I'll keep it at that and really kind of focus on the differences. Or Kafka's been around for quite some time. They're both Apache open source projects. They both got they both have a ton of followers, users, contributors. They're both very active. Technically, one of the things that Pulsar, there's built-in multi-tenancy. There's a lot of things built into Pulsar that weren't built into Kafka from the beginning. And so it feels, and I'm very careful I'm not biased on one versus the other. At Spring, what we do is we bring your technologies to you, not force our particular thing on you. I might be biased to one or the other, but it's if you go into a talk, you have Kafka versus I'm careful not to do that. But if you built something 10 years ago and then you rebuilt it again 5 years ago, it'll be different. You'll probably put more things into it. And I think that's really the what I see. There is some more built-in features. One of the coolest things though is the flexible subscription model. And so you have these different subscription modes that you can go into: exclusive, shared, key shared. What is the other one? Key shared. Basically, by using these different subscription modes, you can configure it so that your system can look like a RabbitMQ, like a queue. Or you can configure it so that it looks like Kafka based on using these different types of subscription models. So definitely that's one place where I see that it is a differentiator between the two.
And that's something that's not available with Kafka.
Yeah, I don't think there's a subscription model like this in Kafka.
Okay.
And it's been, I started with Kafka and I ran a Kafka Streams application in production for a good solid year. Learned a lot of things. Kafka Streams is super powerful, and it's also with whenever you have the state stores trying to rebalance across Kubernetes clusters, it can also be where it's not so fun. I don't think that's a Kafka Streams thing. It's just they've made a lot of improvements there in the state store recently with pluggable stores. But I started with Kafka as well, and
And Kafka?
The reason we noticed that we had Spring for Apache Kafka at Spring, but there was nothing for Pulsar. And so we saw the gap and we saw the need and we filled it. That's how we got to.
And thank you. So Kafka, correct me if I'm wrong, was created over at a company called LinkedIn, right?
I believe
Small
so.
company.
Do we know where Pulsar was created at?
Yeah, it was Paul. It's Yahoo.
Yahoo.
I'm almost positive. Yeah.
I think you're correct. I think if memory serves. But we said that Kafka is not a queue. It's in my head, I was thinking of Kafka as like logs where I could go back to the beginning of time and I can replay all the things. I can move my cursor across these streams of data. And how is that different in Pulsar? What's the difference between a queue then? Does the data disappear? What's the difference between a queue and a distributed?
Yeah, basically once the event's consumed, it's acknowledged, it's gone, right?
Okay.
Yeah, and that's the main difference I see. The distributed log is you have an offset, and by default it's at the end of the log. And this is also the offsets handling is also can also be one of the complications of dealing with a distributed log, in that you have to think about the cursor. It's not a module. Give me the message. I'm sitting here to do a thing. And so, but you can do all kinds of interesting things with that flexibility.
Yeah.
Yep.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so that's a big one too, because we have all these different services running in an organization. Like, I don't want to log to service A, service B, service C, and as somebody who has to go find find out what's going on, locate a problem, and try to understand it. It's much easier to have one location to go look through these logs than 10 different services, right?
Ooh, I'm sorry. I'm looking at these questions, and I see the questions. There's good questions coming in, but I'm going to put a star on it because I want to come back to this.
Got it.
Yes.
But yeah, there's some other interesting features of Pulsar. Tell me more.
Let's see what else is interesting.
The one that's interesting to me was the distributed architecture.
Yeah, that's another thing, is that the compute and the storage are split off to a completely different component, right? So the storage is handled by Bookkeeper, another Apache project. And so what this also does is open the door for scaling, right? And so they claim to be able to handle 5 billion, 2 million topics, or some very large number.
So storage and compute are separate modules.
Yep.
And you said the storage is managed by Bookkeeper?
Yeah, the storage is managed by Bookkeeper.
That's awesome. So how is that different from others?
Kafka, it's all, they're not split out like that. And so what that means is it's harder to scale it, because if they're both located on the same process.
That makes sense to me. In my head, I thought that I could have like one cluster that's handling storage and another cluster that's handling compute for the same queues, for the same streams.
Yes.
And that, to me, right? I don't have cloud money. I have Raspberry Pi money, so I like to have these little things spread around. And that makes sense, right? Where think of a factory, where that real time, or a hospital, right? Where we've got a bunch of little devices in a hospital room, and my use case from before, like a fetal heart rate monitor. Like, we need that low latency. We need this data, and it's very important data. So, do I want to have massive clusters in order to handle these things, or can I separate those workloads? I can make smaller decisions, right? Resilient decisions.
Yep.
So yeah,
and I noticed from the Spring Initializer, there are two versions of this too, right? So there's the streaming or the reactive version and the non-reactive version. So
there's a couple of variants there.
Wait, what's the difference between those?
So there is as soon as we went, so the Pulsar client, the Pulsar Java client is what we latch onto, right? Mm-hmm. We auto configured the Pulsar Java client. It is both a blocking and non-blocking client, in that it's built upon completable future, not reactive.
Gotcha. Mm-hmm.
So you deal with completable futures, or you can do blocking calls. About 2 weeks into the project, I say that sarcastically because we have, there's so much to be done here, and then somebody says, "Where's my reactive? I want my reactive client." And we're like, "Here they come out of the woodworks." Always,
It's October.
And so I get it, And so there was no official Pulsar Java client that was reactive in nature, right? So, what was really cool though is that Sobi knew somebody. Some of our friends over at one was at Stream Native, and so another piece is Confluent is to Kafka as Stream Native and DataStax is to Pulsar.
Oh, now you made Stream Native and DataStax.
DataStax still is, but was more last year, year before. They were really locked onto. They were doing a lot of Pulsar. There were a lot of Pulsar stuff there, but now mostly what they're doing is vector database. They've kind of shifted gears there, so it's pretty much at this point it seems Stream Native and is to Pulsar. And so I got sidetracked there, but so our good friends over there, Christophe Bornet and Laurie Hotari, who's I think Laurie is like the CTO at this point, or at Stream Native. Both great people. He had a concept of a reactive Pulsar client that is adaptive in nature, and that it basically adapts around the Java client. And so it's not fully reactive, but it provides a fully reactive interface to its consumers. The intention is that at one point we will go swap that back out to actually use Reactor. But what this did was we open sourced that into an Apache project, not a Spring project, not a thing. So if you go to Pulsar Client Reactive, it's a Java reactive API around the non-reactive Java client. And Laurie did a really good job. And so back to start.spring.io and what's this Pulsar reactive option? It's that. So that's the reactive flavor of reactive Pulsar template, reactive Pulsar listener, and then also the reactive Pulsar client auto configured.
I'm looking for Stream Native. Do you have a URL?
Streamnative.io.
Okay.
I believe, yeah. And so the other piece of interesting aspect of what we're doing with Pulsar is we also have a Spring Cloud Stream binder. So we have the boot auto configuration, the core, and then the Spring Cloud Stream binder.
Fantastic. Yep. So I have a question. I'm maybe a little bit old school. I remember my first foray into messaging. I'll say messaging because my client and I'll say source and consumer, they had to be synchronized. They had to know what's happening. I had to have my channels or my streams defined on the server side. And it made things complex. Again, talking from JEE days with JMS, it was not easy to create new streaming applications. And I know with Rabbit, from the client, I'm able to create my channels and set it up, and the server will create them without having any additional configuration. Yeah. Is that similar? Can I do that same thing with Pulsar?
Yes, you can create, but the default is to create new topics. You can also turn that off in the broker so you can't do that, or you can also keep there's also the level of schema. And just like Kafka, there's a schema behind the messages to you can configure that to not shoot yourself in the foot or to override everything. So there's all schema compatibility issues, but this can all be configured on the broker so that you can't do that. I mean, we make it hard for you because we want to lock down the topics that you create, et cetera. But by default, you can, what's really nice too is that the topics in Pulsar is a topic URI. So there is, the scheme is persistent, non-persistent, ://, your tenant, your namespace, and then the topic name. And so you can pull all those apart to figure out public defaults, the default tenant and topic. But see, that's that multi-tenancy built in. And so that topic will just be created whenever you go and say, if you were to use, right now, in 10 lines, we could go to start Spring.io. I could grab the Pulsar, Spring Pulsar, and I could do an application runner, and it would say inject the Pulsar template, template.send. Hi, my name is Chris. To hi, my name is Chris topic.send, and then a Pulsar listener that would see that immediately.
So I'm here, and I've already like mangled our vocabulary with some of the stuff. Like when I think of our binders, our Spring Cloud Stream binders, they are set up as source, processor, sync, right?
So
is that the language that we use?
Yeah, but so if you think of if we step back a bit and we say, okay, what is Spring Cloud Stream? And Spring Cloud Stream it lets you take your simple POJO functions, which can be a supplier, a Java util supplier, a Java util consumer, or a Java util function.
Java util supplier.
Yeah, and I love to draw this one out because I can draw the function signatures. And if you talk to Oleg, or he'll say, I don't care in the signature, it doesn't matter. That's your stuff. What we do is take this, and if here's those nodes, the source feeds data, processor does something and continues the feeding. Consumer is a terminal; it does something with it. But so what passes that from microservice A to B to C? It's the messaging middleware is what it goes down to. And so the binder we support are Pulsar. And there's a bunch of other ones besides Kafka, Rabbit, and Pulsar, but there's a bunch of third-party ones. But what that does is, okay, I have a supplier. I output the value. I don't send it to microservice B. I send it down to the queue or to the topic, depending on what it is, right? I send the event down. The processor pulls that one off, does its thing, sends it back down. The consumer pulls it off. Since you see it's the messaging is where that's how they communicate to. There's a lot of benefits by doing it that way. And so what Spring Cloud Stream Binder is it a way to bind your POJO functions to that middleware. You don't, the fact that I say supplier and its a contract is to produce a T or a value out there, that's it. And there's configuration. There's no free lunch here. Like there's a limited bit of configuration you'll need to do. Say, hey, and it'll do things by defaults as
sane
well.
Defaults. Yep.
It'll set up sane defaults and it'll provision the topics and stuff, so you can do nothing if you don't want to, and it'll just work. But the idea being that you'll in any production app, you'll want to tweak these configurations. But your YAML will look like, okay, my food topic, or it has a naming convention. Like, so you would have my user supplier, which supplies user objects, right, and to the user events. And so what that does is it'll be that function name, and then that's what the name of that source will be, and then you can latch onto the configuration options from there. But it takes that and binds it down, and it knows what to do with the output. And on the processor side, which corresponds to a Java util function. Well, what do you have? You have an input. That's my input topic. And then you have an output. That's my output topic, and it's just this up down to the message bus, if you will.
Fantastic.
Yeah, no, those are great because as you said, Oleg always kind of reminds us like, hey, I can't think of any scenario where one of those aren't going to work. And
exactly.
So those work out really well.
And just like for naming, and we're going to hear these names. I said channels, you said topics or queues, but like if I'm trying to wrap my head around a streaming application, these are just some of the languages. So like on the one side where you're generating information, that we called it a supplier or a provider source. Or a source. Yeah. Right. These are kind of names for where we're going to create that information. And then we have a processor. I think of like ETL, like, hey, this is where we're going to change something. And then at the end, we're going to have that output, that queue processor or the consumer
sync
subscriber sync.
Right? Yeah. In non, POJO function terms, it's source, processor, sync. And if we bring it down, and it's easy. If we deal with the POJO layer, we'll say supplier, function, consumer.
And I think I was
mapping.
I was showing my age. I was using old Spring integration terminology.
It's all
and now it's all the same now, right? It's all the same now, which is also really amazing. So that, again, Glenn, our friend that likes to do batch, like we have these integrations and we can think of them in the same way as a source, transformer output. So this is great. This is one of the benefits of Spring. We've been talking about Spring Data and Spring AI a lot and how we have kind of these similar concepts. And now, again, we're providing an abstraction with Spring integration, with Spring Cloud Streams that is going to be, familiar. whether or not you're connecting to Kafka or JMS
Absolutely.
or other, like you get this familiar abstraction that allows you to switch between these different backends, middlewares, etc.
If you look up it'll say blah 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 with providing Spring-friendly abstractions, right? So that's where a lot of things will look the same. If you're even forgetting about the Spring Cloud Stream part, but if we talk about the Pulsar template, the Kafka template, then this XYZ, there's a JMS template, there is a messaging template, and it's the Spring messaging template pattern. And so any of these messaging frameworks, we provide a XYZ template, we provide an XYZ listener. The idea being that you can inject, send messages, events, or produce and consume easily.
Glenn put up a nice little example code here.
It's not formatted very well. I don't know.
But the whole point is, and he makes it here, is like you can write your functions and test those in isolation, and then allow Spring Cloud Stream to do the rest. Like you can bind, hey, this is my function, this is what I want to do, but I could switch it from Kafka to RabbitMQ for a lot of these use cases. It's going to work similar. Right?
Yep. You can also do something interesting. The first thing you might say with that, if I have a function, I'm going to do the terrible thing, foobar, because my brain's just
it's okay. It's a safe place.
I don't want to have a microservice to do the foo and then the bar. Why do I have to go down and back up to you can also compose functions together, and so that's provided by Spring Cloud Function, which Spring Cloud Stream is built on top of. So I can say when I define this function, I can say foo pipe bar. And what that does, it says, oh, I see what you're doing. You don't want to go over the network. You want me to just call it using Spring integration, actually.
So that is a big difference. Now we're getting into the meat of it, because if I'm a RESTful engineer, I'm used to that. It's, I'm going to create something on this table and it's going to sit there, and then something else is going to pull it from that table. What we're saying now is don't write to the table, don't write to the thing, just send it. Right? You're going to create something that's going to consume someplace else. Just send it there.
Yep.
This is nice, right? Latency is the new downtime. Streaming applications can help us, reduce latency. We can get the information where it needs to go faster.
And I love this level of abstraction. We talk about it all the time, like you said, with some of the different projects out there. Sure, you could integrate with these different messaging systems on your own, but the same way that you can write SQL on your own and talk to a SQL database without Spring data, but I can't imagine doing that these days. So I really appreciate some of these levels of abstraction that allow me to focus more on the business requirements of my application than the low-level plumbing of having to do all of this work. And it is a lot of work. If you've ever had to do it yourself, there's a lot that goes underneath the hood to make all this happen.
I always tell everybody, I want you to do it by yourself at least once so you can see what it is, right? But then after that, the biggest win for me, and also it's that I don't want to reinvent the wheel, it's consistency.
Yeah.
If you work in a place where there's 1,000 services running, I don't want to go to team, to the money team and look over there and look at their code, and I don't know where anything's at. They've decided to get cute with it, and they have things over here, and they've done this, like a standard place to and still give people the flexibility to create. That's not the thing. It's being able to do the basics and know where they are. Be able to drop something, pick it up. I can pretty much go into any Spring shop that's going to be doing best practice type stuff, and I can probably get my footing pretty quick.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
What else? So give me a sense of what are some of the use cases that you see around streaming applications?
It's
broad.
It is broad, and that's one thing is when we're here writing the frameworks.
Mm-hmm. It's hard to think about use cases.
It is definitely the framework developer's conundrum, right? Yeah. Because when I was running a Kafka Streams workload in production, and these are also the people that whenever we have contributors or people filing issues, I listen to them because they're the ones who are trying to have a state balance restore, and they haven't slept for 3 days, and they're like, no, this won't work, and that's where the gold is.
I'm going to give you one.
The customers.
I've got use cases in my head, and one of the topics that's really, I guess it's just like a fun place for me to play is not class data sharing, CDC, change data capture.
Oh yeah.
Where, hey, I've written something to a database, and that RDBMS, but I need that information to be immediately sent somebody else. I need actions to be taken on it. And this idea where I can say, oh, here I've there's been a change. Who wants it? This pattern of like, hey, and I can send it to multiple subscribers. I can have multiple subscribers on the same topic channel, and I can connect these things. So it's not just a one-to-one. I can fan out. Is that the right terminology? I can fan these things out where I'm sending to multiple subscribers, or I have multiple subscribers. Fan out, I think, is sending to multiple topics, right?
Yeah.
Like,
I think I'd have to. Yeah.
I have these patterns in my head where I can say, hey, something happened over here, and I can listen to that thing, and I can send it on to one or more.
CDC is powerful for sure.
Yeah.
We don't really have we have limited support here we don't really have any projects that are directly related to CDC. There is we do have one of the we have some, the Bezium is
yes,
it's really well. And so we do have some of the cloud stream applications I was telling you about, the out of the box. We have a Bezium source as well, and some of this integration in with the Bezium as source. And I think that's it. Yeah. But CDC is a great powerful tool.
Chris, this is, to be honest, is the first time I'm hearing of the applications project. Can you explain that a little bit more to me, what it is and when I might want to start looking at it?
Spring Cloud Stream applications.
Yeah. So basically, great. You've provided me this ability to, I have this, if you think about the MuleSoft case and the data flow, the palette. I have a palette and I want to take this box of sources and sinks and draw lines between them and make them do things and have this interesting little pattern, stuff something in the left, something interesting comes out the right, this data pipeline. And so, so I want to source some data from HTTP maybe. Then I want to do an aggregate transform. And wow, these seems like things that somebody else could have probably already done, some building blocks. And so what they are, these are a palette of building blocks. If you go to MuleSoft and you pull down MuleSoft, you're going to have 30,000 connectors to string together your data from all different sources. This is that. This is a preset a set of Spring Cloud Stream and Spring Batch applications, mostly Spring Cloud Stream applications that do some interesting things for you so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. However, we also say that, the majority of them are they're production ready. People do use them in production, but most likely what's going to happen is you'll take them, use them as a starting point, learn from them, and decide how to build your own stuff that's custom to your landscape where you're at.
So if I'm a developer or an architect in an organization and we have like all of these things going on, this is really going to help me kind of wrangle all of that into an application, or give me a starting point for that.
It's going to give you a starting point. I think of it like this. So if you're like, do you remember those little watercolor paints from like when you're at like thing when you pop it up?
Oh yeah.
The Crayola paints. 24 of these colors already made for you, so you didn't have to go out in the backyard to make the chalk and the colors yourself. It's like that. It's a starting kit. And so you're like, you just start, you bought the paper. Well, I have the paper now and the brush. Oh, wow, I have some paints now, and you can start doing your thing.
Gotcha.
Right out of the gate.
Tell me more about this project.
Which one?
The Spring Cloud Stream applications. Because I have out-of-the-box applications that I can use that include binary implementations. So are these just dependencies that I'm adding to my project?
No, so these are Spring Boot. These are each a self-contained Spring Boot application. You can get it either as a Maven jar or as a Docker container. And that the Dataflow supports that. When you say, I'm going to import these apps, and what that is these building blocks, and you'll say they're on Maven or they're on Docker. And so each one of these building blocks is a full production-ready Spring Boot application that's written using Spring Cloud Stream and a handful of other Spring technologies.
Nice.
Tracing, observability built in. So it's interesting because Dataflow and Stream applications are the single biggest Spring user of Spring technologies, if you will, because Dataflow is an enterprise app. It's not a framework. And so that's a different to the other projects.
I like how you said that. That's the truth. And I don't think I've ever said it that way. But Spring Cloud Dataflow is an enterprise app.
Yeah. Along with it comes the complications of, so the other piece about Dataflow that I missed is that okay, great. Where are these things running? And so once you get these little building blocks strung together and you have this pretty little chart and you push go deploy, well, what does that do? And so there's really 3 places it can go that we support: Kubernetes, Cloud Foundry, or local. And local is not meant for production; it's meant for running Docker Compose on your desktop to not have to go do all that when you're trying to do development.
Nice.
So that's a complication. So we not the enterprise apps have a permutation, right, in general of things that you have to support for these, and that drives the complexity of it really. So database is always one, right? Target deployment environment is always one, and so we support 7 databases, 2, 3 deployment platforms using Docker Compose, Carvel. There's another dimension in the permutation matrix that I'm not remembering, but it's there. Different versions of Java, different, so this is the fun of an enterprise application, right? This is what is, it's not a piece. It is built up of pieces. And you could say frameworks are built up of other framework pieces, but it's the end result. Dataflow ships as a Docker container or a Maven artifact. So
right. I threw the link up on screen. So if you're on a podcast listening, Spring.io project, Spring Cloud Stream Applications. One of the things I like on the documentation there, if you go into available applications, it shows you the reusable Spring Cloud Stream applications. And then there's sources for like HTTP, JDBC. You can even use things like Twitter streams. What is the processor? What is the sync? So a lot of really great examples there.
It'll be a depth, go in more depth what we've talked about. It has all the things we've been talking about, but probably in a easier to follow.
Awesome.
Yeah, than me just talking about 1,000 things at once.
So this is just a good a list of things. So when I'm thinking of streaming applications, and I'm looking at the documentation too, it's got a list of sources. We talked about Debezium, but files. Josh has a good video on watching a directory. For files. Hey, somebody FTP'd, some CSV file, and then you fire off your thing. But it's that action. It's that real time. It's a trigger mechanism. FTP sources, HTTP sources, JDBC, JMS, Kafka, load generator source jumped out at me. Like that's.
Don't even know what it is.
We're generating load, a source that sends generated data and dispatches it to the stream.
Yeah, I didn't even know it existed, but
Mail source, MongoDB, MQTT, I'm a fan, right? RabbitMQ, Amazon S3, SFTP, syslog, of course, TCP, time source, Twitter message source. How did that get in there? WebSocket, XMPP,
These were built yesterday, so they've been around for quite some time. My favorite is the time source and then the log sync. Very complicated. Time logger. It spits out a time. And then the other service logs what it received. Is my thing alive? That's not. I'm being funny here, but
like that matters.
It's the hello world of the pipeline here. Time log.
But you brought up a very good point. There's this pattern, like when we talk of observability, and maybe Jonathan will jump up if I say it 3 times. Like if I don't get data, right? If I haven't got a data for a time, in our time series, if I don't have data, does that mean it's up or down? Is that a 1 or no?
Right.
Like what happens? What do you do when you're not getting data? And you've got to have some mechanism that says we're still okay, even though I didn't get a value, we're still here.
Unless it's outside of this window.
Right. Right. So these are all interesting things. But I'm going to keep on going because we got all these other processors. You brought up the aggregator. A bridge, a filter, there's a groovy processor, header enricher, which these are cases that were I heard all of these use cases last week. HTTP request processor, script processor, splitter processor, transform processor.
You can do pretty much anything you need to do by wiring enough of these together. And some of them might be, why am I doing this? Because I could have just done this for you. But I've seen some pretty interesting things been put together with it.
And then the list of syncs is even longer. Cassandra.
The only magic thing here is that somebody wrote a Spring Cloud Stream application that was either a supplier, a function, or a processor. That's it. There's no magic like that. That's what those things are. They're just those they've been built, they've been tested, they've been pushed to Docker and Maven.
Wow.
Awesome.
So just by reading this list and seeing the backends, right, we organize our software the way that our organization is organized. So then when you see this list of things, like you think of, or I do, I'm thinking of all the infrastructure. Oh, where was Elastic? Where was Redis? Where was Cassandra? And how I can connect those things together. How do I break down the silos between these organizations? Well, maybe if I can just have them talking directly to each other. Yeah, this is where my head goes. There's a lot of really cool things here.
Awesome. Look with Kata. Hey, there's a couple of on Kata. I'm not so. What exactly is Kata?
That's a great question.
I don't know what Kata is.
Yep. There's
a lot of things to keep up with.
Yep. And we've talked about it here. From where I sit, we have for the scale to zero platforms, backends, perfect target for something that's a Spring Cloud function. Perfect target for something that needs to scale up and down, but it can scale all the way to zero. Right? Kata is one implementation. Knative serving is another one. And there's Knative functions as well. But these are implementations where I can say, hey, here's my function. Let it sit there. And then I can have a trigger based on an event or HTTP. But we have a great solution where we have a Kata implementation that can be connected to Spring Cloud Gateway. And Spring Cloud Gateway can be my trigger for Kata to stand up that function, answer the call, and then shut it back down. So really, really cool stuff. But there's nothing special, Pritesh, there's nothing special that you need to do here in order to get Apache Pulsar working on Kata. And I can say that from experience. These Spring Cloud streaming applications where you don't want to have, if I'm connecting the dots between hundreds of different syncs, processors, and sources, you don't want to have all these things running all the time. You only want to use them or have them spin up as needed because we don't have money to waste, or I don't have money to waste. So this idea of having things scale to zero, scale up as we need it, that's valuable. But there's nothing special that you need to do here, Pritesh. And if you got something in mind, you're speaking my language. I would love to work with you on something, and we can chit chat about it.
And show you an example. Head over to Spring Pulsar repo and open up a discussion, or open up an issue, and we can continue that from here. We're totally open to user-driven features. Love it.
This is awesome. Glenn says, think about enterprise integration patterns. These patterns can be applied when you create your streams. And some of these patterns are implemented using these apps. Like you just have a reference implementation to go from, right? You know, the special sauce comes in on where you're going to modify it, but
a more succinct way to say it is a reference implementation of a set of EIPs or enterprise integration patterns. Perfect.
That's awesome. This is good stuff.
Awesome.
What haven't we touched on?
When I was going to get there. What are you working on these days that has you excited? Anything cool coming down the pipeline?
So I'll speak on Pulsar. So on Spring Pulsar, we are about to release. We're locked into the Spring Boot release train. So boot releases on a Thursday, the third Thursday, basically. Yep. And Kafka and Pulsar at that Monday the 3 days before. And so it's RC is going to hit in a few weeks. And so it's really just, we've got some new features in 1.2 that were exciting. One of the things that was, when I talked about having a default namespace and a tenant in Pulsar, you don't have a way to, the default is public default, but there's no way to say, hey, I want my default to be foobar. There's no way to do that. And so by using Spring for Apache Pulsar, we're able to, because everything's funneling through us, we're able to, at the last minute, fully fledge out that topic URL. So if you say my topic, it'll go and consult what your default topic and namespace is. So seems little, huge, pretty huge feature. And so that was really nice.
Nice.
And some other, the ability to easily customize what your JSON looks like when you're using JSON schema. To do that right now in Pulsar. Pulsar shades its client, one of its Java client, which is great when it comes to be put in somewhere else. But it also can introduce some kind of complications. One of them is the version of JSON that it's using in there is shaded. And so you can't just say, hey, I want to use this. Here's my Jackson configuration. I want you to do this when you write my messages. And so it was hidden. And so we've kind of teased that out a little bit. I'd like to get that back into Pulsar and not have to have that out in Spring Pulsar. But there's some user convenience features really in 1.2 that I'm looking forward to.
Nice.
Fantastic. And you said that you already have a release candidate out for that?
RC is coming the 18th or whatever.
Timing.
Yeah, you're once you're in the release train, you're in the release train whether you like it or not. You're going down the river. You're going down the river.
Well, you said you'll come out on the Monday before the Spring Boot version, so that means you have the week of Thanksgiving off while everybody else does not. I like how you guys did that.
Yeah, it's just it just landed that way. Yeah.
Yep.
That's solid.
Yeah,
Chris, this is good. My wheels are spinning. Just sometimes it's just the language. It's hearing it explained.
Sure.
Thank you. Thanks, Glenn. Also, hearing it a different way. At least for me, it allows me to think about some of the problems that I face, some of the use cases I have in a different way.
I feel like we're in the same machine. I feel like we're doing the same thing, and you understand me, I understand you. It feels good, right?
Yeah. I like it a lot.
And it's great. As great as the Spring documentation is, and it's one of my favorite. Docs are still docs and can be dry some of the times. Like hearing someone explain it definitely changes perspectives for me.
Absolutely,
so really appreciate it.
If there's any questions about anything, feel free, or anything features want to be added, go head over to the repos and ping us on there, file some issues.
Yeah. And you mentioned one thing, you have discussions open for some of those repos. I love when that's there because sometimes I don't want to file an issue because I'm not sure it's an issue. I can just jump on a discussion and without having to ping the Spring engineers directly. That's a great place to kind of kickstart those discussions.
I'll just say that this is it is not a Spring wide thing. And so we've talked about it. It's really hard on big projects to open up Spring discussions where then we're bifurcated. We can't keep track between Stack Overflow.
Yes,
Pulsar is new enough.
Yeah,
we made this why we want to get people. Let's talk about some things and figure out what we want to build. And it is there, and I agree. I enjoy. If you go over there, every one of the discussions that we've had there has led to either a user contribution or a feature that was implemented based on that feedback. So, and it might just be like there's also ones like it's not working. We don't like it, and then they don't reply back, and eventually you're like. Did you get this working? We got to
rubber duck programming. Solved it. Yep.
This is great, Chris. If people want to find you on the internet, do you want to be found? Where should they find you? Can I share your Twitter?
Oh, absolutely. And Chris Ono BC. I believe that's it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
It's on screen.
Cool. Well, we really appreciate you coming on.
Where the conference together, come up and holler at me. Sorry,
Fantastic.
Dan. Yeah. No, absolutely. Again, I know this has been in the making for a while, so I'm glad we finally got it put together. And I'm sure we're going to get some comments and questions. So we'll have to have you back on again. We'll talk more about streaming data. But appreciate you taking some time out of your day to join us. And
likewise.
Please
thank you so much.
Go feed those discussions. Talk to Chris on Twitter, but don't bother him too much. Give him some good questions.
He's busy. He's on the train.
I know how to silence my notifications. Bother me.
All right. Thanks again, Chris. And for everyone else, we'll see you in the next show. Have a good one.
Take care.